Hello, and welcome to the Better Dad Workshop. This is Charles Earhart, and my name is Ricardo Salcido. Now, Charles, today you put together a workshop titled, "What are some of the musts fathers need to learn for effective child development?"
Right.
Okay, so let me start off with the following question: what are some of the most effective things that dad can do to ensure healthy child development?
Okay. The first things you have to know is use the word DADS as an acronym for dependability, availability, and dedication. So what this means in translation with the caretaking of your child is if you say, first of all, let's say dependability. You tell your child you're going to be home right after work. Let's say it's 6 o'clock. You're going to show up at 6 o'clock. If you say you're going to take them to a ball game or you're going to take her to a ballet, whatever, you're going to make sure that you follow up on these promises, because after a while, your children are not going to really give you much credibility anymore. And what that means is that you're going to start to feel that they're detaching themselves from you, and inevitably, you're going to feel left out. And there's a whole cycle of frustration that follows this. So in terms of your child's personality and character development, if you follow up on your dedication and your availability, your child learns to trust the world. They get a basic sense of security, a sense that the world can be counted on to provide for them the essentials that they need later on in life.
Right. Yeah. It's so difficult. It is. In my experience, to think of them, because they're children, to think of them as actually listening to the promise that we made. Do you have any?
They definitely hear what it is you said, and because they're children, sometimes they would appear to be not paying attention to you, but they take in everything you say, and they watch. Of course, you're a model. They're watching what you say and what you do, as well as listening to what it is you say. So your reliability, your credibility, really is you will lose it, or you will find yourself more involved in their lives, depending on how accountable you are.
Right. So I think some perspective is good here, because I remember when I was a child, and I'll never forget silly things like I would ask my mother to bring me a lollipop when she came home, right? I mean, I didn't grow up in the city, so for me to get one of those, I couldn't. There were no stores around my house. So when my mother arrived at home, I wanted to see her, but the first thing on my mind, the only thing on my mind, was that lollipop. I really wanted it. So I can see how what you're saying makes absolute sense. If you tell a child that you are going to get them this lollipop, you have to come through, because otherwise, it felt horrendous when she didn't.
You learn trust. You learn that if they say they're going to do something and they provide for you what it is they say, you develop a sense of security that transcends just the family. They learn to remember you're the first experience of the world. So when that lollipop comes home when you expected it, they presume that the world, for the most part, is going to be there to provide for them when they say they're going to do something. Right. Now, of course, they're going to run into some roadblocks here and there, but we also provide the tools for them to manage frustration and disappointment. But we don't want them to go into the world expecting to be disappointed. We want them to expect that the world is going to provide for them all the things that they basically need. So they go into the world looking forward to it, to having experiences. They develop curiosity. For a simple thing like a lollipop, sure, right, if that was consistent. But you can see how this concept grows into a much more global idea of how the child begins to interact with the world besides the family.
Right. Okay, so let's go to question number 2. What are some of the traps dads should be aware of that prevent those virtues from solidifying?
Well, you and I were both dads, and I'm sure we could share some of these experiences ourselves. You have to be very flexible, because some of the flow of life changes from day to day. So I think that the traps are maybe a poor time management. Maybe we didn't anticipate how much time we we had to spend with our children, and we have to cut back, and also the amount of attention that we devote to our spouses and our partners. If we neglect them and ignore them because we're busy, all we think about is how much money we're making, and we forget to come home and talk to our wives and our children. Those are the traps, and
Right.
not only that, but society at large has decided that mothers are really more efficient at taking care of children,
Right.
as though they were genetically predisposed towards taking care of children. The fact is that parenting skills are a learned skill.
But let's focus on the traps, because as you were talking about, we get caught up in work, we get caught up in our lives. Maybe our boss did ask us, to work late or later, and we forget that someone is expecting something from us.
Right.
Either just us there to play Legos at night, or the lollipop, or just being there. I mean, it is so important to then not fall into, for instance, the trap of work. You're gonna have to somehow be strong at work and not be afraid of.
No, that's true. I mean, I think that the secret to success in the work area, which is really important. I mean, I have a number of patients who come in and talk about how they afraid to tell their boss that, look, I have a new life, I have a family now, and I have additional responsibilities. They're very surprised when they find out that a lot of the places are very family friendly, and they're more than willing to make the accommodations. The new rules in time management for work now, as I understand it, with the exception of the financial industry, most other places are willing to talk to dads and give them more time at home, provided that they let the boss and the other co-workers know what the status of the work is and where and how to get in touch with them if they need them immediately. And this way, they're more than glad to cut them some slack, because basically know that a happy family, a happy father is going to be a good employee.
Right. Right.
So,
but I like what you say about communication, because I had to grow into that. I definitely grew up feeling nervous about telling my boss that I couldn't do certain things. But as I've gotten older, it's become very clear that if I have good communication with my boss, if I tell him what's going on in my life, he most likely, or she most likely, has children of their own anyway.
Exactly right, and if he.
And also, to be able to tell them ahead of time. So unless it's an emergency. If it's an emergency, you know what? I don't care. I'm leaving. I'm like, look,
Right.
It's an emergency. It's my kid. I gotta go.
Mm-hmm.
But when in non-emergency cases, I do plan ahead. My wife, for instance, is a perfect example.
Planning ahead. That's a perfect way to put
right.
it. Right.
My wife, I don't know, a week ago tells me that she has to travel for business, for work, and so immediately I wrote an email to my boss and I said, look, I'm gonna have to work from home.
Uh-huh.
And because of this, I explained my wife is traveling. I need to do this, and it's like fine. So in my case, I was able. I can work from home, but in the case of those people who cannot, I think communication is still a big thing with their bosses.
You're right. And are there any other?
So let's review what we talked about from these two questions. So what we have here is that. For the father's musts, okay? One is fathers have to grasp the notion of accountability. We talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
Number two is father's actions or lack of imprint on child psychologically, I'm sorry.
And beware of the unexpected blocks to completing your tasks.